What is up, guys? My name is Lex, aka Gucci Mane. We are back here at the Hard Rock playing 10-25-50 today. Last time I played this game, I won almost $17,000. I ran incredibly hot. Let's see how today goes. Let's get down to the table. Let's get to the action. Let's go. I buy into this 10-25-50 game for a little over $6,000. I lose a couple hands early on and then pick up 6-7 suited in the straddle. There's an early position player who races to 150. I call, we go heads up to 4-5-5, 1 heart. I flop an open-ended straight draw here. I check and he continues for a $100 bet. I could check raise here sometimes or call. This time I elect to call and the turn card's the ace of spades. I check over to him, and this time he checks this one back, leading in now to the river, which is the 3 of hearts. Bink, we make the nut straight. We could lead out here on this river, or I think a better plan would be to check over to him, because two things could happen. One, it could induce him to bluff with a hand that wouldn't call a bet, or two, it would allow him to bet thin here on the river, and then we can check raise. So I check over to him, and he does put out a bet, but it's a huge sizing, $1,000 into a $500 pot. I mean, I do have the nut straight, but the board is paired. When he bets this sizing, he's basically representing a bluff or a full house. I'm not sure if I can raise here on the river versus a 2x overbet. Even with the nut straight, I feel like a lot of the time he's going to be bluffing here. Sometimes we're going to be beat. So I decide to play this one a little passive and just put in the call. I show my hand right away, and he shows king deuce of diamonds for the lower end of the straight, and now I'm kicking myself for not raising for value there on the river. I got a little spooked versus that 2x overbet. Wish I would have raised, but I feel like calling is fine as well. We end up taking down a decent pot here right off the bat. All the players fold to me, and I peel back a beautiful 5-6 of clubs on the button. I raise it to 150, big blind calls 150, straddle calls 150, and we go 3 ways to a very nice flop for 5-6 of clubs. 3-4-8, 2 clubs, we flop an open-ended straight flush draw. Big blind checks, and now surprisingly, the straddle leads out for $150. Well, we have a massive draw here, but we still only have 6 high. We could call, but versus this donk bet, I feel like a lot of the time he's going to have a single pair, maybe some gut shots, hands that maybe can't withstand too much pressure. If he had 2 pair or a set, he might want to check raise. So I decided to bump it up here, a semi-bluff. I make it $475. If he calls, I can try to apply some big pressure on the turn or the river, and it would be nice to get there with a straight or flush either way. However, it doesn't come to that. My opponent eventually folds, and we win. Straight flush draw.
Ooh! I had the ace of clubs.
Just a few hands later, the same player from last hand raises in the hijack. I call with 8-9 of hearts in the straddle, and the flop is 4-5-7, 2 clubs. I check, and he checks this one back. Turn card pairs the board, it's another 5. I decide to start bluffing now. I feel like a lot of the time I can bet here. He'll fold out hands that are better than mine, ace-high hands, king-high hands, queen-high hands. If he had a strong hand on the flop, I would expect him to bet. So I make it $225, and kind of to my surprise, my opponent makes the call. I'm going to be going for it here on the river if we get there or if we don't. And we don't get there, it's another 7. So now the board is double paired. Given the fact that I checked the flop and he did not bet, I really just don't think he's going to have a 7 here ever. However, I could easily have a 7. I could have a 5. I'm going to try to get him off an ace-high hand or a king-high hand. I bet out 1 purple chip, $500, hoping this will get the job done. My opponent doesn't fold right away, so now I'm kind of kicking myself for trying to bluff here for $500. The thing is, if you're playing 10, 25, 50, you're most likely pretty wealthy, which means facing a $500 bet, a lot of these players just flick in the chips because they want to see it. $500 doesn't mean really anything to most of these players at the table, so I am kind of regretting this bluff here on the river. Wish I would have just checked and gave up. He might hero call me here with ace high or king high, but to my surprise, he eventually folds and we win. Earlier on in the session, I lost some pots and some bomb pots, and I ended up getting in the game for $8,000. I now have around an $8,000 stack, so I'm basically dead even on the session. This next one's a fun one. Blind versus blind. The big blind makes it 150. I call with pocket sevens and hit top set on 7-3 deuce, 2 clubs. Unfortunately, the big blind does not c-bet. He checks over to me. I put out 175 and he makes a pretty quick call. Turn card 3 of hearts. We make a full house right away. Sitting here with the second nuts, when he checks to me again, I could bet here, or I could get a little tricky and trappy and check this one back. By checking here, I can allow him to catch up on the river, or possibly try to bluff, or maybe hero call me with an ace high or a smaller pocket pair. I decide to trap here and check this turn card back, and the final card is the 10 of diamonds. My opponent checks to me again, and this is the time I gotta put out a big bet, make it look like I missed a straight draw or flush draw or just trying to steal the pot. I make it $875. Back over to the big blind. He doesn't fold right away. He seems curious. He wants to know what I have, so after about a minute of thinking, he puts in the call. Pocket sevens are good. And just like that, we have over a $9,000 stack sitting in this 10, 25, 50 game. Running pretty good so far, up about $1,000, but that could change when we end up playing a massive pot up next. Just a little background before we get into this hand. The main villain in this hand is an unknown player who sat down at the table who bought in for $40,000. No one has seen this player before. He came out of nowhere. $40,000 is a very big buy-in for this game. He's been playing a lot of hands, making a lot of bets, but it doesn't seem like he's been bluffing very heavily. Seems like he's been calling. It's the same exact player who played King Deuce of Diamonds earlier on when I had the straight. So in this hand, I have pocket queens. I raised under the gun to $150. And now this opponent here in the cutoff 3-bets me to $400. Back over on me with pocket queens. My hand is very strong. Let's put in a 4th bet. I make it $1,250. Back over to my opponent who clearly covers me with over a $40,000 stack. I have about $8,000 remaining and he decides to make the call. This is when the size of the game and the stacks make this game massive. There's already $2,500 in the middle. We haven't even seen a flop yet. 4-bet pocket queens and the board comes out deuce 3-4 rainbow. I would say one of the safest boards we could see. I don't expect him to really ever have any sets on this board. It is possible he could have ace 5 for a straight. I feel like a lot of the time here he's going to have ace king, ace queen, pocket nines through pocket queens. On this flop, I continue for an $800 bet, and my opponent makes a pretty quick call, and we get a great turn card of the 3 of clubs. This pot is escalating quickly. I usually play $5, $10, $2,500 maximum stack, and now I'm playing $9,000 deep in a 4-bet pot, $4,000 in the middle. I have to count my stack and try to create a plan here on the turn. How much do I want to bet? Do I want to bet small? Do I want to bet big? Do I want to go all in? Do I want to check over to him? And ultimately, I decide I'm going to bet $2,000 here on the turn, leaving myself with around a $5,500 river shove if he does make the call. So I take my time, I grab my chips, and I put out a bet of $2,000. Everything is going according to plan so far. I put him on pocket 10s or pocket jacks once he's thinking for this little bit of time once I bet $2,000 until he raises to $25,000, putting me all in here on the turn, and immediately I get a sickening feeling to my stomach. You might think to yourself, Lex, you've got pocket queens. You got a snap call, but let's rewind here a little bit. I raise from under the gun, which signifies a lot of strength. This particular player 3-bet me. I 4-bet him to $1,200 and he makes the call. The flop I bet and he calls again. The turn I bet $2,000 with just about $5,000 left in my stack. I feel like he's just never bluffing in this situation, so we can basically discount all of his bluffing hands. The reason I don't think he's bluffing here is that this kind of seems like a suicidal bluff after I 4-bet pre-flop, bet $2,000 on the turn with only $5,000 remaining. He probably expects me to fold 0 hands, so I feel like bluffing here is out of the question by him, so we have to start thinking, what hands are we losing to? Well, we're losing to pocket aces and pocket kings that maybe decided to just flat call pre-flop in position. We're losing to ace 5 for a straight, 6-5 for a straight, ace 3 for trips. That's kind of a lot of hands that we're losing to, but we also are beating hands like pocket 8s, 9s, 10s, or jacks. But would he ever jam all in over a $2,000 bet with pocket 8s or pocket 10s. I mean, I've shown so much strength. I've been a pretty tight player so far at this table. If he did have those middling pocket pairs like 8s, 9s, 10s, or jacks, I would expect him to just call here on the turn, allow me to keep bluffing if I am, and then most likely call on the river. So when he raises here, it just has me in the complete blender. I then think to myself, man, my hand is just way too strong to fold. I've already put in over $3,000, over $4,000 in this pot. Can I ever fold here with pocket queens in a 4-bet pot? The problem here is that if I call and lose, I'll lose over $9,000 in one single hand. However, if I call and win, I'll end up winning the second biggest pot I've ever won in my entire life, over $18,000. To be honest, I have no idea what to do. I want you guys to pause the video now and go down into the comments below. Let me know what you would do in this situation facing a raise with pocket queens. In a 4-bet pot, would you call or would you fold?
I feel like I'm beat.
50-50, this is the second and last call.
I fold.
I call with Lex's hand.
Hey, show one ace, show one ace. One ace. One ace.
Diamond. I call with Lex's hand.
I decided to fold, as you can see, and get shown the bad news. Pocket 9s by my opponent. He had an under pair lower than mine. He went all in, and we could not make the right decision. This is a terrible feeling in poker. You're playing a big game, you put in a lot of chips, and you make the wrong decision. Instead of winning an $18,000 pot, I lose over $4,000, and now I have to live with the tilt of knowing that if all I had to do was put in the chips for the call, I could have been raking a massive pot. This one's tough. I put him on a better hand than mine. I put him on aces or kings or trips or a straight, and unfortunately for us, we get owned here and lose a big one. What made this spot so difficult for me is that he should never be going all in with his particular hand, pocket 9s. That's just a 100% call in this situation in a 4-bet pot, so I didn't put him on those hands I was beating. Unfortunately, we made the wrong decision. We look stupid, we lost money, but we got to move on to the next hand here where the hijack raises to 125. I 3-bet king-queen offsuit in the cutoff to 475, and he makes the call. Flop is 8-5 deuce rainbow. I can have all the big overpairs, so I continue for a $600 bet. My opponent makes the call. Turn card 7 of clubs. He checks, and I'm not going to continue to bluff on this board, so I give up and check back. But the river gives me top pair, queen of spades. My opponent checks again, and I do feel like I could look a little steamy here. I just lost a big pot. I got shown a worse hand. I could look like I'm on tilt, so I decided to take advantage of that potential image and put out a big bet of $2,100, basically polarizing myself to a queen or an overpair or a bluff. I want to try to make it look like I potentially have a hand like ace-jack or ace-king, king-jack that I 3-bet pre-flop, bet the flop, gave up on the turn, and now I'm trying to represent a queen here on the river, hoping he'll hero call me a little bit light, but that doesn't happen. My opponent eventually folds. We get a little bit back here, about $1,000, but we're still now down on the session. I'm not going to lie, the tilt is steaming up inside of me. I keep thinking to myself, man, if I could have made that call, I could have won such a big pot, but I'm trying not to just steam off all my chips. Moving on to this next hand, when I raise ace-king offsuit in the small blind, the same player with pocket 9s earlier makes the call, my nemesis. Actually, he's a really nice guy. We go heads up to a king-high flop. I bet $200 and he makes the call. Turn card 8 of diamonds, and I feel like in this situation, we're either going to be way ahead or way behind. I want to balance out my checking range so that I can't be exploited by my opponents. If I only bet with strong hands and check with weak hands, they can take advantage of me. So I check my top pair, top kicker out of position, and he checks back. River card 4, pairing the board, and after check on the turn, I feel like we're always going to have the best hand here on the river. I'm going to go for value. I make it 275 bucks. Back over to my super nice guy Nemesis, who bluffed me off pocket queens, and he raises now to $1,000. I'm never freaking folding to this guy ever again. I make a snap call, and he shows queen 4 for trips on the river. We lose this one, and the tilt level is at 1,000. There's literally steam coming out of my ears.
The anger sharks are swimming in my head. You gotta dump that shit! You gotta dump that shit!
In order not to blow a complete gasket at the table, I decided to head outside and try some goose fraba to try to relax.
Goose fraba. Goose fraba. Slower. Goose fraba.
After hitting 5 goose frabas outside, I'm back at the table. I'm in the game now for $11,000. Over the next hour or so, I lose some bomb pots, lose some hands, and now I'm stuck a decent amount on the session before I look down at pocket queens again. Oh shit, how much are we going to lose this time? I raised to 125 and the cutoff makes a call, which is my nemesis. The button makes a call. Small blind makes a call, and we go 4 ways to a dreadful, awful flop with pocket queens. 4, 6, 7, 2 spades. Super wet and connected. We're just losing to so many potential hands on this board. So when the small blind checks, I check with my overpair, cutoff checks, and actually the button checks behind. Turn card gets even worse. It's an 8, so now any 5 makes a straight. 9, 10 also makes a straight as well. There's so many 2 pairs and sets that we're losing to. Small blind checks again. I check again. The cutoff player, the big stack who bluffed me off pocket queens earlier and beat me with queen 4 offsuit bets $200. I decide to make a very light call here with pocket queens, given the fact that I have slow played it so far, and the river card's the worst of the worst. 7 of spades pairing the board. Flush draw gets there. I check over to him, and now he bets out 600 bucks. I told myself I'd never folded this guy ever again, but we're probably beat here. Can I fold pocket queens twice to this guy in one session? I don't think so. If he's got me, he's got me. I make the call, and he shows 9, 3 of hearts for 9 high, and finally, we get this guy and win a decent pot. Could be better, but things are going in my direction. No more goose frabas after this hand.
How do you feel? Better.
Now into the last hand of the night, button raises. I have queen jack suited in the straddle. I could 3-bet or call. This time I call and immediately regret not 3-betting when I flop the stone cold nuts on king 10-9 rainbow. I check, button bets out $200. Given the fact that his range can be super wide here on the button, I feel like calling is fine, allowing him to continue to bluff, or value bet on the turn, and we could potentially put in a raise there. I feel like I'm not going to be bluffing too often if I do raise this flop. So I call on the turn card 5 of spades. I check, hoping to check raise big on this turn, but we do not get to do that. When the button checks behind, river card ace of clubs. We still have the nuts, the best hand possible. No other hand will beat us here. My options now are lead out or check over to him. This ace is a good card for him, much better than it is for my range. I could check and allow him to bluff, but I decided to go with a very small bet here on this river. Try to feint some weakness, like I'm trying to set my price with maybe a 1-pair hand. I bet $250. I'm hoping that this will incentivize him to raise, maybe turn his hand into a bluff, or maybe he improved a 2-pair, or he improved a top pair and he wants to raise for value, which is exactly what happens. My opponent now raises to $1,250, $1,000 more over to us. I check the board again, I check my hand. Yep, we still have the best hand possible. No flushes, no full houses out there. I do have around $5,000 in my stack. I could jam all in here, but I feel like that would just look so strong that he would probably hero fold basically every hand except for queen jack for a chop. I want him to call with his 2 pairs or his top pairs, so I decided to go with kind of a disrespectful raise here on the river, a 3-bet with the nuts. to $3,000. I mean, in all honesty, I would never be choosing this size if I was bluffing, but I just want to call. If he's got ace 9, ace 10, ace king, aces, ace queen, I just want him to flick in the chips feeling like he's getting a good price, but that doesn't happen. The button pretty quickly lets go of his hand. We do get a little bit back in this pot, and after playing around 7 hours, the table's not as good as it used to be. I'm pretty tired. I've already lost enough money on the day, so I decide to call it a night. I end up racking up my chips, heading to the cage, and cashing out. Well, that was a pretty embarrassing poker session tonight. I'm not going to lie. One tough thing about poker vlogging is, well, at least for me, I want to be real. I want to show you guys the ups and the downs. It's very fun to showcase the huge wins, the huge pots, but it's not so fun showing the big losses. And then it's really not fun when you misplay hands and show losses as well. Ended up playing a huge pot there with pocket queens earlier on in the session. I 4-bet pre-flop, I bet the flop, I bet $2,000 on the turn. My opponent shoved all in for my last 5.5K, and I folded pocket queens on the turn, which would have been an $18,000 pot if I would have called. He had pocket nines. If I would have won, it would have been a huge pot for me, like the second biggest pot I've ever played in my life would have been today. But I folded, and I try to think to myself, why did you fold? Why did you let go of a hand that strong? I think a couple reasons. One is because I suffer from monsters under the bed syndrome or monsters in the closet. I've had this basically my whole entire poker career where sometimes I get it made up in my mind that I'm beat, that I have a really good hand, but my opponent must have a little bit better of a hand, or I have the third nuts, they must have the second nuts or the first nuts. And this happens to me sometimes. And then other times I don't have this at all, and I call off super light, I bluff super big, and then other days I come in and I'm, kind of scared money. I don't really understand it. Another reason why I think I folded pocket queens is because this game is fucking huge. It's a 10, 25, 50 game. I have 9K. Basically, the entire table covers me. It was the second biggest pot I've ever played in my life. If I would have called $18,000 in the middle, the next big pot after that would be like $14,000 or $13,000 I played. I normally play 5, 10, 25, $2,500 cap games. So this game is very big and it's a tough game. It's a lot of money. So I don't know. I made a bad fold. After recording this outro, I was actually interested what other really good poker players would do in this situation. So I sent out a text, a hand history to 4 of my trusted friends who play poker at a high level for a living. And all 4 of them surprisingly said they would fold in this situation. So that does make me feel a little bit better. However, results oriented, I still wish I would have called. I obviously would have looked like a genius if he would have showed me a 3 or pocket aces or pocket kings, but you can't be results oriented. In that hand, I have to call. If he has me beat, I rebuy. I don't know why I was playing like this today. I'm on a huge upswing. I just made 17K. I'm on like 100K upswing. I can afford to lose a couple buy-ins, but for some reason today I was playing kind of scared money. I was playing passive, made some mistakes, and I don't know. Not really happy with it, but after taking some time, coming home here and relaxing a little bit, I started kind of like comparing it to being an athlete in another sport. So poker is kind of like a competition. You're competing against other people. You're trying to outwin them, outplay them. You're trying to beat them strategy-wise, skill-wise, all sorts of things. So if you can compare it to like basketball, soccer, football, hockey, where sometimes athletes go in and they have their best game, they're on their A game, they're doing really well. And then sometimes they make mistakes, and then sometimes they play a bad game, they lose and they play bad, and that happens in poker as well. Sometimes I go in, I feel like I'm on my A game and I play really well. Some days I go in and I play my C game or my D game like I did today, where I make mistakes, I make bad folds, I don't play hands correctly, and that kind of happened today. I made a bad fold with top pair. I just called on the river when I had 6-7 for the straight, when I should have re-raised. I don't know. It was a tough day. I felt like I played bad, but it's a learning experience too. It's always a learning experience to push myself to try to play bigger, trying to play bigger pots against better players, trying to push myself to become a better poker player. And today I did learn. I mean, every time you make a mistake, hopefully you learn. In the past, I've made huge mistakes. Texas live streams for sure. I made some like really bad plays, some bad folds, some times where I should just have standardly gone all in and I didn't. And I think I'll look back on this day and I'll look back on this hand and think, you know, I've learned from that. I've gotten better. You know, I've been smarter with buy-ins and bankroll. Either way, I don't know. It was an interesting day. I feel fine though. I didn't really lose that much money. I'll put the graphic here, how much I lost. Could have been way worse, but I ended up fighting back a little bit there at the end. I made a set, made some plays, won a 3-bet pot, flopped a straight with queen jack of hearts. So it could have been worse. Could have lost more money. Wish I would have made that call there with pocket queens. Would have been an $18,000 pot. Would have been so nice to win two 15+K pots in a week, right? But you learn from your mistakes. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about this session. Let me know what you think about that hand. Obviously, results oriented, you guys will say call, but I'm interested to see what you'll have to say. But I'm going to get some sleep, be back at it tomorrow. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. Please hit the like button, comment down below, subscribe to the channel, and until next time, I'll see ya.